Oops.
Like might have your round, they might have some synergy.
Oh, yeah, right.
Federal
That's
programs.
the point, yeah.
Yeah, I think legislation that we're gonna learn about now. So yeah, we can conversation coming towards you.
And this.
Okay, and you can hear me okay?
Universal means in your plan.
Oh,
Okay, well, you can't hear me
Yes.
very well.
You can't, I think it's background, you should hear it a bit different.
Plus another.
Sorry, folks, we have 5 minutes. Sorry, just a minute. Sorry, Lucas, can you just say that one more time?
Yeah, no, I can hear you guys, it's fine.
Oh, perfect, no, that's good, thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, so like all development, right? Yes.
Hi, Ted, can you hear us okay?
Sort of pace that to your room.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, thank you so much.
What do we have there?
That's Ted.
Oh.
No, we lost the sound.
Hi, Carol, can you hear us okay?
Of course you're in touch.
I know it's.
Great, would you mind turning your mic on so we can test your audio as well?
Hello.
Hi, that's great, thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Time is here. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting of the Development, Transportation and Infrastructure Advisory Committee for April 18th to order. Councillor Sadhu is unable to be here, so he asked me to sit in on his behalf to chair this meeting. First item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Motion to adopt the agenda. Kevin, Mr. Miro, second Ken Friesen, all in favor, thank you. And adoption of minutes, the minutes of February 15, 2024. Any omissions, additions, errors, anything? You had a chance to look at them? If not, well, good reading this evening, I suppose. A motion to accept those minutes. Rob Queering, seconded by Jackie Hogan. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. All right. Before we go any farther, I'd like to do a roundtable introduction here because we have two new members around the table. And so I think it'd be appropriate to just everybody introduce yourself at least to each other and to our two new members. And welcome to, how many? We're three on, who do we have on? Ted there, Ted and Lucas. Lucas, yes. And Carol, right. We'll get to you three on screen in a moment. We'll introduce people around the table first, and then, so we'll start on the left here. Mr. Miro.
Hello, everyone. Kevin Miro, representing the Abbotsford Chamber of Commerce.
Great, thank you.
Jackie Hogan, I'm the VP Administration at UFB, and Mark Kurtzman was on the committee before, so I'm replacing Mark.
And Brian.
Ryan Lucy, representing the development industry from Polygon and Morningstar Homes.
Thank you.
Greg Forbes K, Abbotsford School District, newly minted Director of Facilities and Transportation Services.
Great.
Excited to be here. Hello, everyone.
Awesome.
Ken Friesen, representing Canadian Home Builders Association.
Rob Quiring, representing consulting professionals. Yep.
And Carol.
I'm Carol Patecal, Fraser Valley Brain Injury, representing accessibility issues.
Lucas.
I'm Lucas Wickbus from Keystone Architecture, representing the consulting industry.
Right, and Ted.
Yeah. Hi, nice to be here. My name is Ted Udelson. I'm representing Heritage for Society.
Great, thanks everybody. Thanks for being here on such a beautiful day. So we have no presentations, no delegations, and we're going to get right into our reports, which I will forewarn you will take the full 2 hours, very likely. So there's a lot of stuff here, good stuff, and we've got all the right people around the table to help answer all the questions we need, or might come up, I should say. So 6.1, did you want to start with the introductory
maybe I'll just, for a few seconds, give Cyril a moment to get set up. So item 1 is 6.1, small-scale multi-unit housing implementation approach. This is our response to Bill 44, which is a recent bill from the provincial government mandating 4 plexes on single detached lots, amongst a few other things. And so we're at a point now where we're updating our zoning bylaw and wanting to bring to the committee some draft material for your input. So Planner Cyril Tomlinson will walk us through the presentation, and happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, Mark, and thanks, everyone. So the purpose today is to discuss our initial approach to meeting the small-scale multi-unit housing requirements. So that's the 4 units per lot, and then we'll also be discussing the initial approach for transit-oriented areas as well, which is a parallel piece of legislation. So the outline, we'll start with small-scale multi-unit housing, then we'll jump into transit-oriented areas, we'll talk about next steps, and then conclude with the recommendation. So essentially, for those that are not aware, in late 2023, the province adopted Bill 44, or enacted Bill 44, which amended the Local Government Act, requiring municipalities to permit at least 1 accessory unit on all lots zoned for single detached dwellings. And so in Abbotsford's case, the biggest impact this piece of the legislation presents is to roughly 250 lots outside of the urban development boundary. They currently don't allow suites. We need to extend the ability for those lots to now have secondary suites. Within the urban development boundary, we have to permit up to 3 to 4 dwelling units on all lots that are currently zoned for just single detached dwellings and or duplexes. And obviously the impact here is much more significant, with nearly 22,000 lots subject to this part of the legislation. And importantly, the city must not exercise zoning and development permit powers to unreasonably restrict the required use and density. So to support local government in the preparation of zoning bylaw amendments to implement these requirements, the province has provided this policy manual and site standards. So these contain recommended zoning bylaw regulations that the city must consider when implementing the requirements. However, we're not obligated to adopt them entirely, and where we do choose to deviate from the regulations, we must provide, or we're recommended to provide some rationale for why we're doing so. So in essence, on one hand, you have the what, so that's the 4 units per lot, and that's non-negotiable. We know we have to do that by June 30th. But it's the how, which is these recommended guidelines the province has provided. So yeah, it's the how we choose to implement it that the city still has some decision making. So we'll work through each of these 5 topics, and for each topic, there's a number of directions we could go. And ultimately, it comes down to what our priorities are. And so, for instance, we could prioritize housing at all costs, or we could choose to prioritize trees and room on the lot for things like stormwater infrastructure. We could prioritize parking, or what the city's proposing to do at this point is to sort of take a balanced approach and try and thread the needle a little bit. So the first topic to discuss is related to housing type. So staff are recommending that the city limits SMU initially. Sorry, SMU is how we've abbreviated small scale multi-unit housing. So yeah, we limit this new housing type to predominantly attached housing. And this means that if an applicant wishes to have 4 units on a lot, they would need to be located within 1 building. So this is consistent with the existing zoning on roughly 87% of SMU eligible lots. And kind of represents a cautious first step from the city. So in terms of zoning regulations, staff are suggesting that SMU development be subject to our existing regulations. So referring to things like setbacks, building height, lot coverage, and density. So the diagrams here on the left, you can see, well, first on the right, you can see sort of a typical building envelope resulting from our existing zoning regulations. And on the left is that same building envelope wrapped in the provincial's regulations, which is quite a bit more permissive. And so the staff are proposing to sort of proceed with our existing rules at this time. Again, that just sort of represents an incremental first step, helps maintain existing neighborhood character, and ensuring that we have space on the lot for other important elements. So in terms of parking, staff are recommending applying a parking rate of 1.5 stalls per dwelling unit. This is consistent with our existing 2+ bedroom apartment rate, and on the basis that we anticipate SMU units being kind of comparable in size to a typical 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. So in terms of lot size, the vast majority of existing zoning on SMU eligible lots allows a minimum subdivision size of 540 square meters. However, there are other zones in the bylaw, in the zoning bylaw today that permit smaller lots. And staff are proposing initially to increase the minimum lot size in those other zones to basically level the playing field between all of our different single detached zones to ensure that there's enough kind of breathing room retained on the lot to accommodate this increase in housing. And then lastly, in terms of housing tenure, staff are proposing to initially proceed by requiring small-scale multi-unit housing units to be non-stratified dwelling units. So you could have, for instance, one principal homeowner with renting out 3 other units on the property. And the intent there is largely to align with the provincial housing target requirement that has identified kind of rental housing as of critical importance here at Abbotsford. So collectively, that sort of makes up our proposed approach to small-scale multi-unit housing at this point. And then shifting gears to transit-oriented areas. So here, through Bill 47, the province identified 104 transit stations across the province that are now subject to minimum height and density requirements. So the purple dot on the map is the Borkwin Bus Exchange near Seven Oaks Mall. And basically, within 200 meters of that the city now cannot prohibit development up to 3.5 FSR in density and up to 10 stories in height. So all of the lots kind of highlighted in blue there would be subject to that. And then the area in red must be permitted up to 2.5 FSR and 6 stories. And then all of those lots, subject to the legislation, cannot have a minimum parking requirement. And so to implement this, the city has to pass a bylaw, our council will have to adopt a bylaw designating the transit-oriented area. They'll also have to amend the zoning bylaw to remove the minimum parking requirements in that area. So in terms of next steps, we'll be refining our approach here, gathering feedback from yourselves and other committees and members of the public. We'll then be meeting with the Urban Development Institute in May. We're proceeding with public engagement. That's kind of launched currently, so that's sort of taking off now along, with these committee meetings. We'll then be using all that feedback to prepare bylaws and bring those forward through the council process in June, all with the objective of meeting that June 30th deadline. And so the recommendation today is that the committee recommend the council support our initial direction. Thank you.
At this point, we are open for comments. Okay.
Absolutely.
So the table floor is open. Go ahead, Rick.
I just have a question about the rationale between for the lot sizes for your single family going to 540.
Mm-hmm.
It feels to me that would encourage the fourplexes, not discourage them. And if you look right now, new detached is trading for about $550 a foot, the same as townhouse, and you're already not allowing stratifying, so that there would be no reason on a 400 square foot lot that anyone would build a fourplex.
Mm-hmm.
I guess losing the 300 to 400 square foot lots feels like a massive loss in McKee and other places, and it feels like through limiting strata or having very restrictive parking requirements, because again, I don't think you should have fourplexes in these lots you're creating. It feels completely unreasonable that the province did it, but just by creating giant lots, it doesn't feel like it's solving it. To me, it feels like the idea of prohibiting strata is a great idea. I hadn't heard that before, and over requiring parking is also a good way to eliminate it. But to just get rid of the small lots just seems really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my comments.
Okay, thanks. Noted.
Lucas has his hand.
Oh, yes, Lucas.
Yeah, just a real quick question. Was the Borquin bus exchange the only transit identified in Abbotsford?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. That's the only one that's been identified so far.
Ted.
So just to follow up on what Lucas is saying, it was my understanding that the Borken bus exchange was going to now be relocated to the Montrose area. Just want to clarify that situation.
Sure, yeah, through the chair. So again, the Borquin bus exchange is the only one that's been identified so far by the province. Obviously, Montrose is under construction, and there's good case to be made that will be designated in the future by the province, but so far they haven't done that.
Okay, I guess they're just not following what Abbotsford is doing, because if Borken disappears, then the whole rationale for building density there kind of falls away.
Sure.
Sure, maybe I can take that one through the chair to Ted. Thanks for that. And during the consultation of this bill, that question was raised. Is it going to respond to existing transit or planned transit? And there was not really a straightforward answer given at that point, but it was something they took away for consideration. City of Abbotsford is not designating these areas transit-oriented areas. The province is doing that. So if Borkwin is relocating, it's up to the province if they want to choose to remove it from the legislation or not. Then we have a decision if we're going to reduce density again or modify the density if the province removes it from the legislation. So it's a bit tricky, but we're just following the lead of the province on this, and so far Borkwin is in and Montrose is not.
Okay, thank you. Certainly the rationale is, to build density where there's a transportation node at the end of the day, but, hopefully they'll follow. Thank you.
Lucas?
Yeah, just real quick again, I'm curious what the updated timeline is for the transfer of the bus from Borkwin to Montrose as far as Abbotsford is concerned.
Oh, we haven't answered.
Sorry. Thank you, Lucas, through the chair. My name is Mike Kelly, Senior Transportation Manager for the City of Abbotsford. I was here just in case a question like that was asked. So we're starting right now the work of the Transit Future Action Plan and the Transportation Master Plan that will sort of guide our next 5 years of city growth in that area. So the intent is for us to start phasing bus rides from Borkwin to Montrose when it goes in service this September. That's when we expect to be buses rolling through Montrose. It's the work that our staff with BC Transit will do for the Transit Future Action Plan that will give that exact answer. We don't have it today. We're starting to work on it right now, and this provincial legislation is speeding up that work. So the intent is not to completely remove it for the September. There will be a phasing of routes, and that map of the circles around the Borkwin exchange, there will still be our primary routes going down South Fraser Way. So it's not like Borkwin will just disappear completely. It will still have and will still serve South Fraser Way quite heavily with our busiest #1 route in Abbotsford. It's just how many of the other routes will still be at Borkwin. So sort of not, we don't have the exact answer right now, but we will certainly know more in a few months' time and be ready for September when Montrose does open.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Okay, thanks. Any other questions on the table?
Respond to Mr. Lucy?
For sure.
Just in response to Mr. Lucy's question or comment about lot size. In building these regulations, it's not our intent to prohibit, or we can't prohibit, or even discourage the fourplexes. The province has been pretty clear that the regulations must allow fourplexes. And if any of the regulations get in the way of one's ability to do fourplexes, then your regulations are essentially prohibitive. And we got to be careful with that. So with respect to lot size, 300 square meters was getting into an area where when you look at all the other pieces of regulation, such as parking, I'll take as an example. So with a fourplex on a 300 square meter lot, that's 6 parking stalls potentially that have to fit on a 3,000 square foot lot. If they can't get their building size because we're requiring 6 stalls, then that becomes prohibitive. So there's when you turn one dial on lot size or turn a dial on parking, they're all kind of interrelated. So it's trying to weave a balance between all of these and not look like it's prohibitive. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to prohibit. We're simply just trying to regulate it the best we can and enable the fourplex units on a single detached lot.
And I might add, throw in our urban canopy or urban forestry policy or initiative as well. How do we keep trees in our urban setting if we're going to just pave it all under, put buildings in? So that's the other factor to consider as well.
Yeah, I like I said, I'm not a big fan of Bill 44 because it prohibits you from creating new lots. It's a big issue for Coquitlam Township and everywhere. But I know townships trying to a way where they're gonna, if you create new small lots, you put a bond that's released when you pull a permit for a detached home, and you know, because once the home's there, but I actually think it's not physically possible to put fourplexes on those small lots, especially with the frontage people are doing it, you know, 11 meters or 12 meters. And I just think it's a housing type that we were all moving to. All the municipalities were working hard to get to these smaller lot detached houses, and then it just all got pulled away from us from the province, and the large lot just takes it away. And I think Blake or Mark or any of you would agree, the small house on a 3,200 square foot lot is a great addition to the urban fabric, if it's a house. So I don't know if there's another solution, but I just feel like a large lot, you lose a great product type.
Ted, is your hand up? I mean, it is. Okay, thank you. No, it isn't. I get it. Any other comments, questions before we leave this? There is a recommendation, I believe.
Yes.
You'd like, can you put it on the screen again, the recommendation? So the staff is looking for support of the initial direction, not the final direction, but initial direction of what you just heard here today. Anyone wish to move that recommendation around this table? Thank you, Mr. Miro, seconded by Ken. Any further comments or questions about it? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? I don't see any opposed. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, Cyril. Next, 6.2 Secondary Suite Incentive Program. Gavin Limas, you're on deck. I mean, you're at the bat. Please. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so this is a presentation on a draft secondary suite incentive program for the city. This is partly related to the kind of secondary suites being permitted on most properties legislation, but primarily it's a result of a federal grant commitment that the city's made through the Housing Accelerator Fund. So this is a presentation of the draft program to committee members for your feedback. We'll start just with a brief background around the current regulations around secondary suites in Abbotsford and that Housing Accelerator Fund grant program and council commitment. Then we'll move to discussion around the incentive program goals and some program details before concluding with next steps and the recommendation for the committee. So again, just for some context, right now in Abbotsford we have secondary suites permitted on around 80% of single detached properties. However, there are some zones and some land use contracts throughout the city where secondary suites still aren't permitted. As my colleague Cyril explained, by June 30, except for in very limited scenarios, suites now have to be permitted on all single detached properties in Abbotsford. Of course, those suites are all subject to building code, so if building permits required, we review that for life safety and building code requirements. In addition, of course, no more than one secondary suite in a building. Right now in the city, we require suites to be registered, and we also collect a $260 annual infrastructure fee for properties that have secondary suites. Through this program, we're not anticipating any changes to that at this time. For some background on this Housing Accelerator Fund, so you may have heard in the paper or elsewhere that the city has been successful in receiving a $25.6 million grant from the federal government. And that's on the basis of council committing to 7 initiatives that increase housing supply. One of these is a commitment to expand secondary suite permissions and incentivize the legalization of unauthorized suites. As part of this funding commitment and agreements, the city needs to permit, in order to get the full funding, needs to permit 73 new secondary suites over 3 years through a program like this. The way the funding breaks down, the city gets around $32,000 for each of those suites up to the 73, meaning, for example, if we permit more than 73, we don't get additional funding for that. The part of the commitment is that we create the program by June 30th of this year. And we anticipate the program would run for at least 3 years, or until those 73 units are permitted at a bare minimum. We could always go to council and report that the uptake was much stronger than anticipated, and we might need to direct more housing accelerator funding to this program. But 73 units is kind of what we're anticipating right now. And of course, in addition, you may be aware that the province has a incentive program for secondary suites as well, offering up to $40,000 in forgivable loans for secondary suites subject to certain conditions. So this would kind of be parallel to that. So there's this incentive program, but there's others as well that are run through the province. So in order to meet our city's Housing Accelerator Fund commitment, our program goals are to legalize unauthorized suites and incentivize the addition of suites to existing single-family homes. It's also to ensure that, of course, suites are registered with the city and that, perhaps most importantly, they're safe for occupancy. So our approach to achieving these goals is to make permitting a new secondary suite as attractive, fast, simple, and transparent as possible, while ensuring life safety compliance. And absolutely, while we'd make it as easy as possible to get a secondary suite permit, to not compromise at all on those life safety requirements of the building code. In order to kind of achieve this, we're hoping to use a combination of financial and regulatory incentives. So that would mean making permits easier to get, but also hopefully using some of that housing accelerator funding, which the city is able to receive, to offer a financial incentive to people who want to either come forward and legalize an existing suite or to put a new one in their home. So the kind of framework of the program that we've put together is really focusing on a streamlined permit process. Our idea is to have a life safety checklist that an applicant would complete that follows the kind of a number of key building code life safety measures. The applicant would check off that those measures are going to be implemented or are already in place for their secondary suite. And they could submit that with their application, and if that checklist is complete, the permit can be issued essentially upon receipt of that checklist. We also look at waiving fees during the program. However, even though you can get your permit, once you submit that checklist, our building department would still conduct inspections as usual to ensure those life safety measures are being implemented. That lets us, as a city, ensure that there is that life safety building code compliance. And then once you receive your occupancy permit, you'd be able to receive a $10,000 grant from that Housing Accelerator Fund. So that's the financial incentive piece. We do anticipate that eventually the city won't be able to offer that grant in perpetuity. But we do think that we could continue to offer the streamlined permit process for secondary suites as long as council is comfortable with it. So that's just the general framework of the program. Just to compare that to our current process. So right now, of course, for submit your building permit application, you need sets of drawings, an application fee. With this incentive streamlined permit option, we'd be looking at just an application, completing that checklist, no application fee. Staff would confirm that your application and checklist are complete, and at that point, we can issue your building permit. From there, you're able to undertake the works authorized by that permit, but we do conduct our inspections as usual to ensure compliance with the checklist. And once you complete your suites and receive occupancy, you're able to get that grant. Just to conclude, we think the program offers both a strong financial and a regulatory incentive to permit suites. Because of that, it satisfies the city's and council's Housing Accelerator Fund commitment, which is important, and does this by offering those transparent requirements, reducing the processing time. Despite all these incentives and making it easier to permit suites, we do feel that this does ensure life safety compliance, which is paramount. Just to conclude on the program. So for next steps, we're presenting the program right now to committees. So we actually had a positive discussion this morning with BIPAC already, and of course there's this committee as well. In June, we'll be presenting the program to council ideally for consideration and endorsement. And then through July 2024 to July 2027, we expect the program to be running and implemented. So with that, the request is that the committee support this direction of the program, or the committee recommend that council support the direction of the program as presented, and happy to take any questions or discussion.
Great. So let's first put the recommendation on the floor and ask for someone to move the motion, the recommendation. Rob, moved by Rob, seconded by Ryan. Thank you. All right, discussion, questions, comments. Rob.
Is there a minimum or maximum size for the suite? Or is that currently in place for secondary suites?
I know that through the chair, I know the building code doesn't have that restriction anymore. I'm not sure. I believe our zoning bylaw does in most cases. Don't believe that's part of the work plan for small scale multi-unit housing at this point. Maybe Paul, do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, through the chair, the zoning bylaw does currently limit secondary suites to 100 square meters. Used to be 90, but that provision of the building code is gone, but it's still regulated in some zones through the zoning bylaw.
On the screen.
Oh, Lucas.
I'm just curious if there's any way to track if people are actually renting out these suites. Like, what's to stop somebody from just finishing their basement, taking the 10 grand and not actually renting out the space?
Yeah, through the chair. That is a great question. Certainly, we'd be verifying through the occupancy permit process that there was indeed a unit that is ready to rent and be occupied. At this point, we're not anticipating further follow-up to ensure that it is being rented at all times. The idea is to have a unit constructed that could be rented in the future or could be used. That's really the impetus behind the Housing Accelerator Fund commitments and what the incentive program is meant to do. Anything to add?
Good.
Just to follow up on Lucas's point, I think, obviously the intent of the government is to be able to house more people. So if they can't police that these new suites will actually serve that purpose, there's a problem. So I think that should definitely be considered. Other question is there a parking requirement tied to these suites?
Through the chair, yes, the zoning bylaw does have a parking requirement for secondary suites. I believe it's 1 space per unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
73 units was a very specific number. Where was that from?
Through the chair, yeah, that's a great question. That was part of the projections that the city had to supply to CMHC in order to make our Housing Accelerator Fund application. We used historic permit data for that. We used a number of units constructed, number of secondary suite units constructed, and arrived at that number. That number is not just the number of total suites, it's the number of additional suites we'd expect after the incentive program as well, like the number of units to be incentivized. So it is a bit of a projection, but that is how we arrived at it.
So this is to, I think Lucas's question was to stop someone from taking, putting $10,000 and renting out their suite. This is to curb that happening, not the ones that are already doing it properly, right?
It's meant to incentivize, through the chair, it's meant to incentivize people who want to put new suites into existing homes that don't have suites already. But it's also, part of it is also to incentivize people who haven't come forward or who wouldn't come forward otherwise to legalize or authorize an existing suite and bring it and make it safe for occupancy.
See
that? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob.
That's an interesting point because all of the people who follow the rules went to the building department to get a proper permit, spent the money, get zero. The people who cheated the system, built without a permit, renting it out illegally according to our bylaws, now get a handshake and a $10,000 check, perhaps more money from the province. That just seems unusual. I could see encouraging new applications, but to take already unauthorized suites and now say, hey, fill out this piece of paper, send the inspector and get a $10,000 check. That's an interesting thought.
Through the chair, could I offer? Yeah, the idea is this is an opportunity that is new for the city, right? This is funding the city wouldn't have otherwise had that we were able to get through committing through the Housing Accelerator Funds to receiving. So we're certainly sensitive to those arguments, but it is something that we're now able to do because of this Housing Accelerator Fund. In addition, this will ensure that units are safe for occupancy, and that's the goal.
I totally understand your point, and on the other side of it, from our perspective as a city government, the federal government saying you must provide X number of, it's provincial government, isn't it? Federal targets. Yeah, the targets, provincial targets. You know, you've got in the next 3 years, you're supposed to provide X number of new units. However we arrive at that number, I guess existing illegal suites or brand new ones, we can still say, yeah, we provided 73 new units in 3 years and get them off our back, you know?
But the illegal ones were already there.
Yeah.
Like that's the, unless unless the new builds maybe have the first chance at the application, and then after a while, if you don't get to 73 new ones, then maybe to meet our quota, you can open it up to.
That's why they knocked 2 off of 75.
I don't know. I understand because this out of the $32,000 grant from Ottawa, the city keeps $22,000 of that, and the homeowner gets $10,000 of that. So of course we want to maximize and get full grant money.
Just to finish that comment from Rob, so the 25 million that the city does receive goes towards some of the programs within the program itself, as well as other things that could be used to help build housing, whether that's building some infrastructure or some amenities or certain things to encourage housing. And we have 3 years to spend that money. So I don't want it to be perceived that the city's just taking the 22,000 and pocketing it for other things. It's intended to be for housing and must be spent over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And how we arrived at illegal units or illegal suites, we can debate whether we should penalize or incentivize. We have a program that we presented to CMHC. We got grant funding for that initiative, and we're doing our best to incentivize that and to make sure these units are safe. We know there's a lot of units out there that were built without a building permit.
Yeah. It is a greater good of housing, and that comes to play. If somebody puts their suite forward as a candidate, you talk about making them safe. Does that also include making good parking? Like if they've simply just added a basement suite with no additional parking stalls, does that get factored in?
Yeah, through the chair, we would anticipate that there would be a basic zoning review as well of these. It would be permitted use, but yeah, as far as parking goes, most properties probably won't have a parking problem. If you have a garage and a 2-car driveway, that satisfies the requirements for a single detached plus a suite. But yes, we would anticipate that you still have to meet your zoning requirements.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, Kevin, if you feel that is important for the record, we could amend the recommendation or support the recommendation with that condition added to it as well. And that information would go to council when we prepare the.
I think it'd be important to think about, you know, without knowing exactly how it's written. It is, you know, making safe is one thing, but also building the community so we can flow through the roads and not overpark on the streets like Canada has happened. The illegal suites that are already there are already doing what they do. That part won't change, but having some control over the flow of that could be beneficial.
Yep, that's a good point.
So Yes, Ken.
One question, just the amount of suites that we're planning to do this for, just 73. Is there any consideration to increase that number? Or maybe I didn't understand, how was that determined that you'd only go for this amount? Because I could see this program being popular and this could happen pretty quick. People could be lining up there to take advantage of this.
Yeah, through the chair, we certainly will monitor it to see what the uptake is, and if it's greater than anticipated, we certainly can present that to council and have council make a decision on that. The 73 is the basic projection that we had given to CMHC, which they accepted. We don't get any additional money for units up beyond that 73, so that would just be the one consideration. That $32,000 that we get for each unit is only for each of those 73 units. Anything beyond that, we'd have to reallocate housing accelerator funding from other initiatives potentially, or other ways to spend it onto additional units if we chose to do that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
How many secondary suites are applied for currently on average per year?
Mm-hmm. We have new secondary suites through the chair in around 50% of new single detached dwellings that come in. We have around 5,500 that are currently registered. Don't have the numbers directly in front of me unless you do, Paul, but for some reason the number 110 or so sticks out in my mind as kind of the lowest number we permitted.
That seems a little high to me, but I would say somewhere between 50 and that.
It was 110 single detached, and half of those have suites.
Just thinking on average, I expect to see 2 or 3 secondary suite applications come in for assignment each and every week. So.
Okay. Thanks. So it could fill up fast.
Yeah, so it could be done within 2 years, less than 2 years.
Yeah, and just to say what Ed Gavin had said, or to support that, is 73 was the projection in considered a milestone. As we get closer at 73, we'll report back to council and say we're nearing that 73 and we're only 1 year into this program. Council, do you want to continue with it? So the question came up this morning in BIPAC as well, and the member had asked, what if we get 260 applications? And my response was, I hope we are wrong with 73. I hope it is more, and I hope it is successful. But we're just basing it based on the data that we have and past trends and trying to project that forward. And so I wouldn't consider 73 being the end. It's a milestone. It's an opportunity to check in and see, A, if it's working, and 2, does council want to continue with it?
Kevin?
Is there an estimate of secondary suites that are out there that are not supposed to be there?
Don't have a permit.
Through the chair, the only speculation I could do is using BC assessment data, which we have looked at. BC assessment, of course, classifies which properties have suites and which ones don't. Comparing the properties that BC assessment thinks have suites to the ones that are registered with us, the difference is about 2,000. Mm-hmm. But obviously, that's just one indicator. There's probably more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right then.
I was going to follow up one more last bit.
Please do.
On that note, I would just hate for all of these first 73 to go to existing suites that are out there, and at the end of the day, all the people that want to maybe create a new suite are now left out of the dark, because the people that have suites probably could fill out an application in about an hour and could run down to City Hall. It's like the e-bike incentive last year. It's like, oh yeah, maybe I'll go buy a new e-bike, and by the time I even got to my computer, that grant money was gone and oversubscribed. So I just want to maybe have you guys think about maybe a plan, a rollout plan maybe, so that you do get the new suites going first before maybe converting an old one. It's just my thought pattern of how I know people work. And if there's 2,000 in Abbotsford, it'll be like getting concert tickets down there.
Maybe I'll just try that one first.
I don't know.
It's a great point, and we want to add units, right? That's the name of the game. Although there is some other data points that could suggest where suites are, we don't know. So how do we know who comes into the counter, whether they have an illegal suite or not? So it's tough to triage, and it's going to be very difficult, put a lot of pressure on staff to say yes or no to individuals. As those applications come in, we'll process them, and if they follow through with putting in the building code requirements and it makes it safe, they'll get the grant money.
You also see, Rob, a lot of older homes that have been partially converted or very close to it, but they didn't actually know how to get a permit or were scared of it. New homeowner buys it and they want to make it proper. That could be a good candidate for that too.
Yeah. Okay.
Greater good of housing.
Is there a comment back?
Yeah.
Staff?
Heather Power, Director of Community Planning. One of the things I wanted to comment on was that probably one of the reasons that we have approximately 2,000 is that don't have permits is because there's some concern about getting a permit. And so that's part of what's factored in here is they're put off by getting a permit, or they're put off by this $260 a year fee that we charge or being registered in some way. Also factored into this is the 10,000 comes after you've done it. So you've got to provide the checklist, you have to now install anything that we've asked you to install, and you're paying for that up front. So your smoke alarms or your new window that you've got to put in or whatever it is that you're doing, you have to pay for up front. And then once that's all done, then you're getting the 10,000 at the end. So so there's some of that is built in to where we know not everybody's going to be running on it.
So I wasn't aware transitioning an illegal suite to a legal suite counts as part of your housing targets then? And if you build a new house with a suite in it, that will count as 2 units towards your housing targets?
One is a rental as well.
Right, of course.
One in the rental category, one in the ownership category.
Yeah, interesting.
All right.
Ryan's doing some math now.
Well, we have a recommendation on the table. Call for the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Don Lyman's son?
That's correct.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You could tell. Don in my first years on council. Yeah, good man. Say hi to your dad.
Of course.
Yeah. 6.3, Heather's on Planning Development Services Annual Report 2023.
Yeah, so I'll have the report there. The slides are pretty much what you've seen in the report, and I don't have a lot to add about them other than maybe to just have a look and answer questions as we go. And I don't have very many slides. This is a summary of the number of applications received and compared to previous years and the 5-year average. This is ALR applications, development permits, subdivisions, rezonings, and OCP amendments. And these give you some examples of those applications received. This represents in-stream residential applications, so haven't received full approval yet, but it kind of gives you some ideas that apartments are our biggest category, which is reflective. You'll see in our OCP data that this is where our OCP was trying to get to was building more apartments, and the permit data is bearing that out. And these are some examples of those being built. And then we have the institutional, commercial, and industrial floor space. So total number in-stream increased by over 41% in 2023 and reached a record high. Also reached record highs here. In terms of approved residential applications, these were a couple of notable projects. And similar number of units between 2023 and 2022. Some examples of ICFP applications. This is issued building permits, generally on par with previous annual totals. A significant decrease in single-family permits and an increase in multifamily. And this represents construction value. It decreased by 21 million, but this we had Paul here. He would tell you it's going to be higher this year, I think.
It will be higher this year. The first 2 months this year, we're already at 350 million. So we're already halfway, 2 months in.
That's the code change.
And then these were some project initiatives in 2023 that were, the McKee Neighborhood Plan got adopted, the sign bylaw got updated. We had some waste management zoning bylaw provisions that got updated, and the D3 project, our digital building permit process, substantially complete. So that's really the summary.
You're busy.
Yeah, definitely, especially Blake. and for most of these, if you have questions, Blake's your best person to ask questions of.
I have a question about the McKee plan. Are you going to revisit it now in light of the new lot sizes? Because I think probably 50% of the land uses don't work in it, or do they? So is it going to go through an update process?
Not at this point. I mean, we know that SMU is going to affect it for sure, and we'll probably have to do some looking at particularly servicing models for that. At this point, we haven't contemplated a redo of the neighborhood plan. Yeah. Any other questions?
You've got a pretty satisfied group here.
Okay.
Or they know it all.
Just update one number. I said 250. I just looked it up. To end of March, our construction value was 427 million.
That equal last year?
480 last year.
Whole year.
Yeah.
Maybe Chair, if I could add also, I just checked our numbers. We're just under 700 new units already this year in our division as well, approved through planning. So I think we were just over 900 last year, or
889 last year.
889, and we're right around 700 right now.
Good. We get that province, the provincial government off our back pretty quickly. Good. Any last thoughts, comments, questions? There are no recommendations here. That's just a report to bring you up to speed. Easy. All right then. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And now Ryan Perry's going to give us a little update on the OCP.
No, I'm good.
You're doing it?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Ryan's chickened out.
Ryan's working on the OCP.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Sure. So yeah, we're going to kind of bring you up to speed on where we're at with our OCP, talk about the process, and highlights of stage 1 in our engagement plan. And we'll kind of go through the steps here. So I'll just start with the why update the OCP. An OCP is typically updated every 5 to 10 years. It needs to reflect your current population demographics, and that becomes a big driver. In this particular case, our city council asked us to update the OCP through their strategic plan that they adopted in January of 2023. And when we started, we thought it was going to be a minor update. The 2016 project had been really a rewrite of the OCP, and we hadn't anticipated a lot of changes to that. But then there was some provincial legislation that came out about housing. and transit. And so that definitely has changed the scope of the project. And we'll have to be responding to that. So this is kind of our timelines. Part of that legislation was a mandate to have this initial round of our OCP completed by the end of 2025. And then in anticipation that we would really be doing our OCP every 5 years. It's sort of a roundabout way. They mandate that our housing needs report inform our OCP, and that has to be done every 5 years. And so you're really looking at your OCP every 5 years as well. So in terms of our timeline right now, June 30th is when we have to get our SMU adopted, and then we'll probably be looking at refining that through our OCP process, and again, done in the end of 2025. And that's what our cycle thereafter will likely look like. But just to kind of break it down, the OCP is really made up of 3 major parts. One is policies around land use, one is development permit guidelines, and the other is OCP maps. So land use designation maps, transit, parks, that kind of thing. So those 3 things will likely be updated. And at the end of the process, we will likely have some recommendations for changing the zoning bylaw as well. And that would probably be something we would move into doing after the OCP is updated. In terms of the role of an OCP, it is an overarching vision for the future of the city. It outlines desired distribution of existing and future land uses. But there are some parameters in terms of legislation around it. So the OCP is enabled by the Local Government Act. It must contain certain things in it, certain types of policies, and it may contain other kinds of things. All those things are listed in the LGA. The OCP also has to be consistent with the regional growth strategy, which is about to be updated by the Fraser Valley Regional District. And it has to reflect our most current housing needs report. And of course, it was initiated by our strategic plan and is guided by that. And then once it's adopted, it informs all the other master plans and strategies that we do. And all of the financial planning and on-the-ground capital projects that we do, all of that is supposed to feed into each other and be responsive. This gives you an example of the kinds of policies that are in the OCP. The OCP doesn't do everything and all things. It is more of a high-level policy document. And this gives you an example of how that might work in the form of an urban forestry framework. So we have a policy that says expand and strengthen a healthy and diverse tree canopy in the OCP. The master plan goes into a little more detail. The urban forest strategy is where we actually identify a 40% canopy cover. And then the tree protection bylaw is the way that we actually look at individual trees and decide whether or not they can be cut down. So it kind of gives you some idea. Okay, so in terms of process, it's a 4-stage process. Stage 1, we did about a year's worth of background research, which resulted in our background research report that went to council in January, and that helped us to understand where we are since we adopted the last OCP. We're now in stage 2, and the primary focus of this stage is public engagement. In May, we're going to be doing several open houses and a World Cafe. So one of our bottom line requests of the committee is that we're looking for some committee members, 1 or 2 committee members, to come to the World Cafe. That's scheduled for May 22nd, if you're available. And we'll make that request through the chair. So there'll be all kinds of opportunities to talk about important subjects feeding into the OCP. once we've gone through our engagement period in May and June, all of the comments that we receive from these open houses from our Let's Talk page will go to council in the fall, where we'll be making some recommendations based on that engagement for what new policies we may be recommending in the updated document. And then that'll feed into stage 3, which is us preparing new policy. And stage 4 is where we actually have a public hearing and adopt a bylaw. All right, so this slide just speaks to branding a little bit. The branding is kind of taken from the 2016 version. You'll note that in 2016, we were working towards a certain population of 200,000. We've slightly changed that framework, so now it is really just a 25-year time frame. Abbotsford 2050 is the name of the project, and that is consistent with what the regional district is doing with their regional growth strategy, also looking at a 25-year time horizon. All right, so now I'm going to just summarize the background research report and try to highlight it for you in case you want to focus on certain areas of that when you take a look at it. We start with an introduction of what OCPs are, what the planning process is. Abbotsford today has our demographics, statistics, and population, and it'll speak to population and housing. Residential rental vacancy rate is one example here. Those kinds of things. Our progress report identifies what our goals from the original OCP were and how we're doing with each of those goals, and those do include our urban structure and as I was alluding to before, the percentage of, we had a goal of 60% target for the urban core. We did 65% of our development in that area. So it kind of gives you a progress report. We talk about existing city plans and strategies and how those are feeding into this process. We also talk about local Indigenous neighbors. And then we do get into challenges, change, and opportunity, and identify that, of course, housing is one of the big issues of the moment. We talk about and try to summarize the provincial legislation and how it will impact the project. And we talk about, of course, climate change, which is one of our other big topics to be concerned with. Our 7.0 is our engagement strategy. And identifies not everybody, but it gives you an idea of everybody to be engaged with and the way that we're planning on engaging. And then we do a jump-starting dialogue, which is issues that we have identified already that we know we're going to have to address, and of course, housing is one of those. But the way that it's structured is we might have a problem statement or an early idea, and this one is from our Housing Accelerator Fund as well. And then we'll have rationale as to why we think that should be addressed. And you'll see some symbols throughout the document that identify where that comes from, one of them being the OCP big ideas, and on the right is the symbol we've created for half funding. And then we kind of talk through each of the initiatives that we have for the Housing Accelerator Fund and the legislation and how we'll be addressing those. And then, of course, we have next steps, which identifies where we're at right now. And this is our timetable. We are hoping to go to council in the fall with our engagement strategy and new directions. So, as of May 1st, well, right now we have a Let's Talk Abbotsford page up, but on May 1st we'll be posting all of our event dates and times and venues and all the opportunities there for engagement. And that's it for me on that one, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions? Rob?
How many people do you think we will have in Abbotsford in 2050?
Yeah, do we have that number? I know one of you
Plus or
asked.
minus.
These are my stats, guys.
I believe the projection that we were rolling with was 250,000 people.
We're at 170, 180
We're
now?
about 170.
170 right now?
Plus 73 suites.
There's some irony in that it works well for branding. It's 25 years, the year 2050, 250,000 people.
Yeah.
So
and will we have SkyTrain by then? If we want it, I don't know. Do we?
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Any other comments, questions?
Kevin? Comment, seems very appropriate that we're shifting from 200K to time.
Yeah.
With where, where the last 8 years have gone, where the vision is going.
Yeah.
For the next bunch of years.
And if I could just respond to that, the planning work is pretty much the same, Kevin, as far as how we do our work. In 2016, we decided to use a population number instead of a time frame, just because we thought that kind of would resonate better with people, using 200,000 versus 20 years from now, what does the city look like? And so although the planning process was the same and the background work, the technical work was all the same, it was just more how we presented it to the public.
I think it's good.
Ken?
Yeah, one question is, how do you plan on getting more engagement when it comes to like public input with the OCP? Like that seems to always be a challenge every time you're trying to do a big update like this, and I think everyone's always trying to figure out new and creative ways to actually capture the attention of the public. But like, I'm just curious to know, like, are there any new creative ways that you feel are gonna really resonate with people and engage public?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. We have looked for opportunities. We have our engagement plan and we had, like open houses planned. We have advertisement that's going up all over the city for it. But we also are looking for opportunities where people are already having some kind of event and going to that event, which I always think is important. It's, people are already there. We go to where people are as opposed to expecting them to come to us all the time. So I think that's part of the strategy. For instance, we're looking into, I don't know if you knew this, Mark, but we're looking into possibly going to the air show, having a booth there, that kind of thing. So that's one way we've done it. But you're right, it's challenging. I think another part of it is trying to get through to people why it's important. If you just say, hey, come and talk about our official community plan, if they don't know what an official community plan is or what it does, they're not going to be motivated to do that. So I think there's some of that too. Yeah,
that's a good idea. We'll like try to get more involved in other events, like even like I don't know, like at the Ivy Canucks, have something set up there, right? Or at different events at the Trade X or wherever there's large, or even just partnering up with other associations, whether it's CHBA or UDI or I don't know, a lot of builders and developers go into places like Blackwood Building Supply or wherever, right? And people can, just find new creative ways to put it out there, so that people aren't pounding on the doors of City Hall when the OCP gets adopted and they're all worried about what's happening in their backyard.
Right.
So.
Good.
Well, we did have really good turnout the last time around. That was clearly we learned some important lessons there, and I think we'll use the same lessons. So we'll learn from those. I mean, we'll implement the things we learned, plus any new ones, I'm sure. But like the storefront in downtown Abbotsford, it seems to me that was also very positive. People popped in, just walking down the street.
Yeah, and it reminds me of 2016, it was outside of city committees and council, everything was outside City Hall. And trying to piggyback onto an event that's already taken place. So the storefront was during the Christmas tree lighting, if I remember correctly. And then it stayed there for about a month. We were at the city center neighborhood plan. We were in Seven Oaks Mall in a storefront for a month. So I'm not sure if we'll do the storefront again, but the idea is to get out in the community. To Heather's point is keep the language as simple as possible. You get about 30 seconds with an individual when you're at an event. And so we try to just cater the material to that 30-second interaction. And a lot of it is simply just making them aware and then driving them to the website. That's what we did in 2016. That was our first sort of foray into online engagement. I think our online engagement now is a little more robust and refined, so I think we'll rely heavily on that platform again.
All right.
Anything else?
Sounds like that's it. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. And there are no recommendations on this, just another update. And so, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. 3:15 thereabouts.
All 118 pages.
We have no new business, and I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn. Rob, Ken, all in favor? Carried? We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.